Good evening, everyone. This is Dale Wetzel. We're at the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. We have another edition for you of the Legislature Today radio show. We're going to speak in the first half hour to our Superintendent of Public Instruction, newly elected. Her name is Kirsten Baszler. She is the president of the Mandan School Board and a former Bismarck school administrator. We also have with us State Representative Rick Becker. He is a plastic surgeon in Bismarck, newly elected to the legislature. He's serving his first term in the State House, and he is the sponsor of one of the concealed carry gun bills that we're going to be speaking about with Representative Becker and Superintendent Baszler. There was a hearing on several gun bills in the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning. In terms of what happened in the legislature today, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we're going to talk about what you can eat and drink at the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck with our co-host, Mr. Scott Hennon. It is Teeny Tuesday, Mr. Hennon. What is Teeny Tuesday? Are you partial to teenies?
I'm not a teeny fan myself, I have to admit. I did just have a draft beer that was very, very good, and I'm just kind of a simple, just give me a draft beer kind of guy. But the teenies are...
Can't you have like a draft beer in a teeny glass?
I suppose you could. It just doesn't really float my boat necessarily. But the teenies here are very popular. The martinis is what we're talking about. And they have all... I had somebody the other day say, the Peacock, I have to get down there for one of those chocolate martinis. And I thought, chocolate martini, my goodness. That sounds like a dessert, not a drink. But
it is a dessert, not a drink.
They've got all the goodies. They're 2-for-1 martinis, and also their appetizers, which are nothing short of extraordinary here at the Peacock, are $2 off until 10 o'clock tonight. So lots of reasons to come to the National Cattlemen's Association Beef Innovator of the Year. That's a major award. There's only one restaurant in the country that gets that every year, and usually it's the coasts, or maybe a Chicago steakhouse that gets it, but the first time ever a North Dakota restaurant has that, and it is the Peacock. So come on down. Good night to come on down, and there's a lot of folks here. The place is buzzing.
It means if they're cooking beef at the Peacock Alley that they know exactly what they are doing.
There you go.
We're going to be speaking about a less, speaking on a different subject. I was going to say a less tasty subject. Don't want to trivialize anything, though. We're going to be talking about guns right now and how they can be carried, where they can be carried, and by whom. And we have with us again the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kirsten Baszler. Welcome, Superintendent Baszler. And we also have Representative Rick Becker, a Republican from Bismarck, who is the sponsor of one of the bills we'll be discussing. Welcome, sir. Representative Becker, could you just describe to us what it is that your bill does?
Sure. The bill that I sponsored makes it so that a person who has a concealed weapons permit would be able to have that concealed weapon at a public gathering.
And there are also a couple of other bills that we're going to be discussing. One of them would allow a person with a certain type of concealed weapons carry permit and permission from the school board to carry a gun in school, and also a person with a particular type of concealed carry permit and permission from the church governing authority to carry a gun in a church. Superintendent Baszler, about the school gun bill, obviously this is a reaction to the Sandy Hook atrocity. Do you think it's an appropriate reaction to have a bill like this?
Well, Dale, I think your opening comment captured it pretty well. It's not an appetizing subject that we're having to deal with, and it's nothing that anybody really wants to speak to or speak about. That we've reached a point in our society where we have to talk about having guns in schools or churches or public places at all. It is not really appealing to anybody. The bill that was heard today, 1215, which allows the local school boards to make the decision, is, in my opinion, the worst of all evils, because at least it puts the local control in the hands of the people that are closest to the children and has the pulse of the community. With that being said, the Department of Public Instruction stayed neutral for a long time on this issue because we understood the validity of having the question open of, it not being a gun-free zone. But as I heard from parents and teachers and administrators, I began to think, boy, this is something we really have to give some consideration to. But the true tipping point for me in the fact that we needed to take a stand was when I would just visit casually with high school students that were coming through the Capitol to visit and tour and watch and observe our legislative process. And as we talked and I asked them if they had any questions for me, they expressed to me their concern over having guns in their schools. And as an advocate for those kids that don't have an opportunity to vote for themselves, and hearing those concerns of theirs, that they didn't want a principal or their teachers and they didn't want that in their schools, I felt that we needed to take a position, and we did oppose that bill today.
And Representative Becker, I know that this isn't your particular bill, but what is your philosophy about, the idea of it should be legal to have a gun in schools or guns if the person who's carrying it is trained in its use, has a permit, and satisfies some kind of requirements, and also has the permission of the school board.
Right. The aspect of the schools actually is part of my bill as well, because any public gathering includes schools and school functions. Additionally, originally in my bill, before it was amended, it had similar, very, very similar language where a person would need to have permission from the school or school board. My feeling on it is that the idea of a gun-free zone leads to a false sense of security, because gun-free zone really is gun-free zone, parentheses, except criminals. And the idea that if guns were allowed, we're not actually placing guns in schools. If any of these laws or bills pass and became law, I think that the schools would look exactly the same as they look now. It's just that there may or may not be somebody who has a concealed weapon on their person, which in itself would hopefully be a deterrent for some idiot that wants to come in and commit a crime.
Superintendent Baszler, one of the things I was thinking about when you were giving your testimony this morning is that, right now some schools have resource officers, and they are more or less policemen. I mean, they're not dressed exactly as policemen, but you can tell that they're policemen, and they wear firearms. And I was wondering, is that sort of display preferable to, frankly, have someone in plain clothes, you don't know if they have a gun or not, and it might be a situation where it's out of sight, out of mind, and that might be preferable in terms of the peace of mind of the students that you were mentioning. They don't like to see guns in their schools, but maybe what they don't like is somebody, with a pistol on their hip versus one that they can't see.
That may be a factor. I think the difference, though, is that person that is a school resource officer has chosen to do that for his vocation. He or she has chosen to do that and has gone through extensive training on safety, emotional, psychological, physical training on how to handle that situation. Teachers, principals, superintendents go into teaching and have a whole different set of skill sets and a different type of interaction and different set of training to interact with students than they do. I think we're all a bit uncomfortable when we see somebody armed in a school. School resource officers that I've had experience with do a great deal of relationship building with their students, and I think that might be an asset as well for teachers to do that relationship building. But I think what we really need to do is put our firearms in the hands of people that have chosen to be committed and dedicated to the proper training that they need to do that, and not add just another thing to what students expect from their teachers.
Representative Becker, what do you think about this, the idea of putting, instead of having people with permits carrying guns, and they may not be trained in law enforcement per se, having the school resource officer in a school? Is that a preferable alternative?
Well, I think you're looking at two different viewpoints, or two different ways of looking at the same thing. My approach isn't that we're trying to put guns in people's hands. No one's going to go to a superintendent or a principal or a teacher or the custodian and say, now it's your turn to carry the gun. We simply want the ability that at any point in time, we don't know in this public gathering spot, which is in this circumstance a public school, there could be a citizen who has gone through training, background checks, fingerprinting, who has decided to get a concealed weapon. They may have that on them, and that may deter someone from doing something. Or if something is going down, hopefully that person would be running toward the scene of the crime and stopping that individual.
One of the remarks that was made at the hearing was that if you are going to carry a gun in a school, according to this law, you need to have what's called a Class 1 permit, and a Class 1 permit requires you to demonstrate some proficiency with a gun, shoot it, and show that you can hit what you're aiming at. North Dakota has two different types of gun permits. One of them is the one I just described. The other one, you essentially have to take an open book test and demonstrate some familiarity with the firearms laws in North Dakota and where you can carry a gun, but you don't have to show that you know how to load a gun or shoot a gun or handle a gun at all. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Kim Koppelman, mentioned during one of the hearings that he didn't agree that you should have to have the more stringent license in order to comply with this school gun carry law, that a Class 2 license should suffice. What are your views on that?
I don't have real strong feelings one way or the other. It's not that difficult to get a Class 1. It does require some shooting proficiency. Again, I think that the likelihood of someone actually needing to use their weapon is very, very low. A person who's got a Class 2 who may find themselves in the circumstance of being able to stop a perpetrator of some huge crime is going to be in a much, much better position than a person who has no weapon. It may take him a few shots. Maybe he or she is not going to be as proficient as the Class 1. But again, world's better than nothing.
Yeah, but what I wanted you to elaborate a bit earlier. Earlier you mentioned that no one is going to force a gun on someone. They're going to have to be willing to carry it and be licensed and somewhat trained to do so. I mean, the thing that came to my mind when this was being discussed this morning is, what if you have a school where no one wants to have a gun?
Great. I don't have a problem with that. But people aren't going to know. And that's the whole idea, is every day at school would look the same as it does now.
Except that the way that this bill is written, that someone would need to know. And right now it's written that the school board could go into executive session, which I would prefer if we're going to pass this. Because what I've heard from many people is I would be the first target then. It would be announced to our local community that I would be the one with the concealed weapon. We have the sunshine laws in North Dakota, and I would be the first target to be taken out because I had that weapon in my classroom. And that's a concern. People that went into teaching don't want to take on that responsibility. And the way that our open meetings laws, records laws are set up, someone would have to know. Someone would know.
I'm interested in what both of you would think about the provision that you just mentioned. One of the things in the school gun law is that when the school board discusses who should carry a gun, when they discuss firearms policy in general in the school district, they can do so in executive session, which means that the public is not allowed in. It's essentially a private discussion amongst the members of the school board and certain other folks who are bound by the rules of the executive session. Do you think that's Superintendent Baszler and Representative Becker, do you think it's appropriate for a discussion of that magnitude to take place in secret?
Having been a school board member for nearly a decade, I appreciate the sunshine laws in North Dakota, and I've operated under them for quite some time. And I think that our local governance works because we are only allowed to go into executive sessions for very specific reasons. This would be opening up a whole new venue that I'm not sure that it would be creating policy in executive session outside of public comment. I'm not sure that I support that step in that direction. With that being said, if the purpose is to remove, the purpose of this bill is to remove the identification of gun-free zones and having a perpetrator not know which place may have guns and which may not, I don't know how we could do that in any other way than an executive session.
What do you think, Representative Becker, about the idea of the school board discussing gun policy amongst its own members and no one else?
Well, I'm not big on executive or non public access meetings. And I'm not sure how it would be interpreted as it's currently written, but what I would think would be ideal would be if the school or school board were to have a meeting to determine, are we going to allow concealed weapons or are we not, period. The idea that you would have to have a meeting for any person carrying a concealed weapon individually and make a determination, we're going to let you, we're not going to let you, that seems a little goofy to me. I would think either you'd have a policy we allow concealed weapons or we don't, and then that meeting could be open. And
then the identity of the person who actually has them is not a matter of public record. Am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
That would be that. If I was in charge, that's probably how it would go.
What do you think about that solution, Superintendent Basil?
It's wonderful in theory, but in actuality, under the laws of the state of North Dakota, what would then have to happen is the administrator would then need to make a decision. And any time a decision is made by an administrator, it's a part of public record that is open to public access because it's not an executive session. So you would like to think that you could keep it private, but under the laws of the state, which I think are wonderful, it would not be a reality.
I'd like to know, I mean, you're a member of the school board even now, and what would you think about the legal liability of, okay, so you're on the Mandan school board. The Mandan school board says, you know what, we're not going to have guns in schools. And then some nitwit comes in and shoots up your school. One of the some of the children are killed, and their parents sue you saying, look, you could have tried to prevent this and you didn't.
Played that scenario out many, many times as a school board member. And then there's the converse of that of there is a procedure in place and the gun is supposed to be in a lockbox in a teacher's locked drawer underneath their desk, and it accidentally gets left out and a student accidentally got shot. There is liability on both sides of this argument. And as a teacher, I'm going to come at it from an educator perspective too. I'm a hunter. I have a shotgun. I have a rifle. I've gone through the hunter safety program. I have had more training required as a hunter safety course to pass that than I would be required to get a Class 1 license for a concealed carry permit. And I would not, as a longtime hunter and gun carrier, be comfortable having a firearm in my classroom when I'm in the steward of 25 students and having that in a lockbox and having an intruder. So I think it's a lot to expect from people that aren't trained as security officers or school resource officers.
I mean, obviously, Representative Becker, this is not an ideal situation, but is it better than the alternative?
Well, I think so. As it stands now, if something were to occur, you either can throw yourself in the way of the shooter, take one bullet, maybe there'd be one other less dead person. You can wait for them to empty the rounds into the school kids, and then when they're changing their magazine, try and tackle them. Or if someone had a concealed weapon, then they could go and try and stop the attack at that moment.
One of the things, Superintendent Basler, that you said during the hearing that I thought was really interesting, you mentioned situations that you're familiar with where there were actual situations that were defused essentially without public knowledge because of the protocols that were in place to try to deal with situations like this.
I think that's a real important factor. I think what we really need to be talking about, and I think we will, is a multi-pronged approach. But that is, the headlines are never made by those situations that are preempted. And they exist in our communities, in this community, in the state of North Dakota. But they never make the headlines because of really great planning and a real coordinated collaborative effort among many players. Those situations are preempted. One involved a troubled middle school young person that had detailed plans in place with an arsenal to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. But through this crisis management plan and this alert school system that was in place, the social worker, the counselor, the school principal, the school resource officer, and the crisis management person were reacting. Another situation was a non-custodial parent that was upset with the school district because they weren't receiving the information that they felt they deserved to receive about their child, but they were the non-custodial parent. Again, through the work of collaborative work and a very good procedural effort, that's where I would prefer to put our energy and resources.
Representative Becker, at the end of the day, what do you think is going to be done in the legislature as to where someone can carry a concealed gun where they cannot do so now?
I mean, based on the hearings today, are you suggesting with the Senate?
Just based on that and any other data that you would like to bring in.
Well, if I extrapolate what happened with the drone bill, and I find my variable, multiply it by the number of police officers in testimony today against all of the gun bills, because apparently they're not big on the Second Amendment, I would say that all the bills are going to fail.
You think all of them are going to fail?
Well, I think that at least 3 or 4 of them for sure.
Yeah, and we're talking about bills to carry a gun in school, to carry a gun in a church, to carry a gun in a public gathering, and also to carry a gun in a gambling establishment or a place that's licensed for gambling.
That one I wasn't around for. That may pass, but the other one, I think the 3 that you mentioned, and then the one where we don't want state law enforcement to carry out the wishes of the federal government for confiscation of guns and things like that. I suspect that'll fail too.
And so, Superintendent Baszler, is that a good thing, do you think?
What I would like to say in my role as a superintendent of public instruction truly is this. However we decide, whichever manner the legislature decides, the role of the Department of Public Instruction is to support the school districts in whichever way to keep our kids the most safe during the hours that they're with us. It's our number one priority. So we will continue to work with our school districts in whatever way the legislature deems appropriate.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
we
you.
have with us Representative Rick Becker. He's a Republican from Bismarck, a newly elected member of the North Dakota House in his first term. And the drone bill he was referring to was a bill that he sponsored to require law enforcement to get a warrant before using a drone for surveillance, and that was defeated in the Senate after being passed in the House. We also have with us Superintendent. Good evening. This is Dale Wetzel. We're at the Peacock Alley American Bar and Grill in downtown Bismarck, North Dakota. This is the Legislature Today radio show. In our second half hour, we're going to be speaking about Western water issues. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how the oil industry gets water, gets industrial water, the network of independent providers that are set up to provide that water, and how they're interacting, to use a term, with a new state authority called the Western Area Water Supply Authority, which also is building a network of industrial water depots as well as a way to supply water to communities, which is its primary purpose. We have with us Mr. Steve Mortensen, who is the chairman or president, which is it, Mr. Mortensen? Chairman of the Independent Water Providers of North Dakota, and he represents a group of folks who have established private facilities to sell water for industrial use in the oil industry. We also have with us Representative Todd Porter. He's a Republican from Mandan, and he's the chairman of the House Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, Dale.
First of all,
hi, Steve.
First of all, Mr. Mortensen, tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how'd you get into the water business?
Well, Dale, I'm from northwestern North Dakota, up there, Williston. We farm and ranch at Trenton and west of Williston, and we've been there since 1980. Well, in fact, I've been there my whole life, but started farming in 1980. Married, have 4 children. They're all growing in school, and they were really helpful in our whole farming operation. We've always ran a certain amount of irrigated acres. We pump our irrigated water out of the Missouri River. We have a gravity flood project down there in Beaufort Trenton Irrigation that we use, and I guess I got into the water business about 3 years ago here when I was given the opportunity to supply industrial water to the oil industry there, and like I said, we've bought quite a bit of property, through the years, and we didn't get any mineral acres because everybody had reserved them from the other previous oil booms. So we've really been blessed with this opportunity, like a lot of other ag people up in northwestern North Dakota that is supplying this market.
Representative Porter, tell us what you do when you're not in Bismarck spending your time legislating.
I'm in Mandan running the ambulance service.
All right.
I've been a paramedic and part owner of the ambulance service in Bismarck and Mandan since 1983, and that seems to be a pretty full-time job. And then I've got two small children, Jordan and Matthew, that are a fourth grader and a second grader, and they certainly consume quite a bit of my time.
Tell us about where you're from originally. You're from Mandan originally?
I'm born and raised in Mandan. I left and went to paramedic school down in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Came back, and I've been here working and legislating ever since.
How'd you get in the ambulance business?
That was back in that era of the Rescue 911 or Emergency 911 with Johnny Gage and Roy DeSoto. And we were high school kids and got involved with the Mandan Volunteer Fire Department, and then took an EMT class when we were in high school, and it just kind of caught that was going to be a really neat thing to do. And when I moved back here from Minneapolis after taking my paramedic training, there weren't any other paramedics in the Bismarck-Mandan area, so I got to actually be the starting and driving force of advanced life support and the offering of paramedic service in Bismarck and Mandan.
How long have you been in the legislature?
This is my 8th session over there. My 4th session as chairman of Energy and Natural Resources, and it was a funny thing when I got elected in '99. I told them I would serve in human services as kind of a penance if they would put me on natural resources, where I was excited to deal with hunting and fishing issues. Little did I know, some 14 years later, that the whole premise of the committee would be energy and have very little to do with hunting and fishing issues, and would have to do with landowner and surface disputes and water disputes and energy and the siting of pipelines and power lines and power plants. And I didn't even know what the word siting was when I got elected.
Mr. Mortensen, you're down here to follow some specific bills. Could you tell us about what brings you to town, so to speak?
Well, we've been down here just about the whole session, and there was a majority of bills. I think there was one water bill that was going to tax the use of industrial water that got killed on the House sides. But right now we have a Senate Bill 2359 that has crossed over from the Senate onto the House side right now. And I guess that's a bill that basically the independent water providers have introduced, addressing some of the concerns and that we have with the WAS project. We've never denied that there should not be that WAS project in northwest North Dakota, because we needed potable water for that area at the rate we're growing. And we were even, like I said, when 1206 was passed 2 years ago, we were upset that they were going to come out and sell water, but we knew that they wanted to pay for a portion of this project with the industrial sales, and right now we've kind of accepted that. And I guess some of the stuff that we're introducing in House Bill 2359 is we want to limit them to the 12 depots, because those 12 depots they built are mega depots. They have 6 ports. They have the capabilities to supply up to 1,400 fracs a year. And the last 2 years, well, in fact, since the industry started here about 4 years ago into the hydraulic fracking, the independents have been providing about 86% of this market. And so, you know, when they're coming in, and granted we haven't really been affected yet, but they're not up and running yet. And, you know, as they get the treatment plant up and running and they get adequate water, and if the industrial or the municipal needs don't serve out, they'll have a lot of water, and that's what we're worried about. And also in Senate Bill 2359, we are asking them to introduce legislation that takes away that right for any other municipal project to oppose private water development. McKenzie County down there has inserted an issue called 1926B, which they have a small USDA loan that they've got for their rural water program that says they feel they have a franchise fee in that area. So they are restricting anybody that can start a water project in McKenzie County. And a funny thing about that is they've even sent letters to the Corps of Engineers, to the State Water Commission, denying these private individuals the rights to have access to Lake Skakawea. And our legislation has been fighting for about the last 6 years to get access to Lake Skakawea. So it's really a concern that on one side we're trying to get access to Lake Skakawea, and we have another entity in North Dakota trying to set policy with a restriction of the 1926B. And as House Bill was passed 2 years ago, the concern was there going to be enough water? Well, the oil industry said there was going to be enough water for both of us to be able to sell, and they felt that would not be a problem. Well, with the independents right now providing 86%, the boom has gone away. We used 10,000 acre feet in 2011, or 9,400. In 2012, we were at 13,400, so we were up from there. But that need that they were talking about, and plus with the introduction of so many other independent water providers being able to apply this industrial water, we took this project, we passed it, and we're sending it into a market that already we're serving. And we have tried to visit with WAS, and negotiate some sort of settlement, but it's just been impossible to really be able to come to any terms with them. And I guess, like I say, this is why we're here in the legislation, still, trying to work some agreement with them. And I know they say it's all about our money, that we just want to make money. Well, in reality, it's about them guys wanting to make money too, because all the profits of this go back to that entity. The state of North Dakota is guaranteeing this project, but all the profits from it go back to them. And we feel that, them profits should go back to the state, and we feel that there needs to be just more oversight from the State Water Commission to direct these funds as they're needed to quantify how much rural water use is out there. We've got the main trunk line in right now, which is great, I think. And like I said, it's going to serve Watford City, Ray, Tioga, Stanley, and those are the areas that are going to grow. But for the additional funding they need, I think we really need to quantify that.
Representative Porter, how does one referee something like this? You're the chairman of Energy and Natural Resources, and I'm sure that you have these competing interests in there, and they're each telling you what's what, or trying to persuade you as to the rightness of their cause. How do you, to what extent in this issue in particular, have you gone about trying to weigh the competing interests?
First of all, I use a big stick, and I smack them.
How big is it?
Smack them. It's big, and I smack them.
If I compare it to a baseball bat, how is it larger than a baseball bat?
It's a good sized chunk of wood.
Okay,
it's a good size.
That's maybe what you should use. Honestly,
we've had the hearing on a lot of water bills and a lot of different water issues, and the House had the Water Commission's budget in it, and this go around it's over $500 million. And Dale, as well as anybody, that when you start having dollar amounts and budgets of that magnitude, that there's going to be fights that are going to start happening and things going on. We went from last biennium, the Water Commission budget for water projects out of the Water Resources Trust Fund was about $230 million. The session before that, it was about $30 million. And it's all directly related to oil. They were smart when they put a trigger on the extraction tax that went in for water projects. But, as we sit and listen, we fully understand we created WAS. When we created WAS, there wasn't even what people would say a remote possibility that the Corps of Engineers was going to open up a permit to directly extract water out of the river or Lake Skakawea. We were begging for that to happen. We were sending resolutions. We were doing all sorts of stuff, and there were individuals that were independent water providers that were applying for those permits. We were basing then a model of WAS on the fact that we needed water for the oil industry. And by doing that, it was going to be a combination project, a rural municipal water project along with the industrial sales to pay back the state of North Dakota. We were going outside of the bar on everything in how it was going to be designed, constructed, and administrated outside of the normal avenues to get this thing going and get it done, because the oil industry wanted water and needed water. Well, fast forward 2 years and the Corps releases the permits, and independent individuals go out and start securing easements to lay a pipeline down for infield servicing of the oil industry. And now you have a direct competition between WAS and the independents. And that draws us back into the fight with the water bills and everything. The whole system, and then you take the other side of it, that we have been pushing people to develop gathering line infrastructure and water infrastructure and putting everything in the ground rather than on the trucks on the road. And so the whole oil industry and the fracking component is changing, that these companies are wanting to have their water delivered to them rather than have it trucked into them. And so the whole model in the 2 years from when we developed WAS in the 11th session to now has totally changed, and the whole competition level between the independents has changed, because now the independents are seeing the model change also, and they want to be in the pipeline business, and they want to move water through pipes like WAS wants to move water through pipes. And so you have this just direct conflict that's happening. So in all of the hearings, I've told both sides the same thing. You guys need to sit down and figure this out. If you force us as the legislature to make the decision, neither one of you is going to like what you get. And we're going to come out with what we think is best for you, having never been out there and set foot on the ground looking at the issue of water. But we are going to solve this and get this settled. I mean, we spent a lot of political capital getting those permits from the Corps. We've had our congressional delegation in Washington, the governor. We've been fighting with the Corps for since 2006 to get water draws for commercial purposes out of that lake. And then we finally get them, and now we have this butting of heads between these two entities. And it is what makes western North Dakota go around. Without the water, there is no oil, there is no injection wells, there is no fracking. And so it's a very, very important issue to the state of North Dakota, and we're deeply involved in it. And we had, I think, the first hearing on the first bill, we had almost a 10-hour hearing on it to get both sides to feel comfortable that they put their issues on the table. On the second bill, we limited it to an hour to each side because there wasn't really any new information that they were offering that wasn't already in the other bill. So we limited it and put it into the subcommittee, so that the subcommittee now will be meeting this Thursday really for the first time to really go after and do some work. They met and did kind of the introductory things last week, but there isn't, in my estimation, and coming out of the Energy Committee, there isn't a bigger single issue right now to the state of North Dakota and the citizens than these water issues.
Do you, to what extent do you sympathize, if that's the term, with Mr. Mortenson's concern that the private independent water producers who have put in their own money are having to compete with a taxpayer-supported agency? It's
a situation that of course we created it, but during the creation process, I personally don't recall anybody using the term 1926B. I don't recall anybody saying anything about limiting competition or restricting independent producers of water. And when those issues started to pop up, I got a little concerned because it was our understanding that the WAS pipeline and the WAS system would be out there and be selling, from depots to help pay back the loans to the Bank of North Dakota that we authorized. But the amount of sales was based on somewhere around between 25 and 30% of what they felt the total volume of sales were. But again, the part that I think as I'm peeling this onion away, the part that I'm seeing is the game changer is that really the depots are already a thing of the past, and the direct trucks pulling into a yard or a water depot are a thing of the past. I think both entities are really super pushing to have mega pipelines going directly into the oil fields, and that's where the big rub, of course, is coming, because WAS is claiming that if it's in a pipeline, it's in direct competition to us, and the independents are saying you can't stop us from putting a pipeline in the ground and servicing our customers through that means of providing water.
I was thinking as well is that wouldn't the Western Area Water Supply Authority have a built-in advantage when it comes to supplying by pipeline, because wouldn't they be able to, if necessary, lay their claim eminent domain on a person's land, lay the pipe down, whereas a private
they sure could
provider can't do that.
But the other difference is that Western Area Water has a higher cost because they're delivering at the level of potable, where the independents are just delivering at the level of raw. So there's apples and oranges there too. Both work for the oil field, but of course WAS is claiming that they can't compete head-to-head if the independents put a pipeline in, because that infrastructure cost is virtually the same other than the securing of the easements, but the product that runs through it is totally different in price, and they can't run raw water through WAS's pipeline, so they can't compete head-to-head with that. And that's another issue that we have to get through.
Mr. Mortensen, what do you think of the analysis that water depots, and you have one, are a thing of the past?
Well, I don't believe they're going to be a thing of the past, because, we're looking at 20 to 30,000 wells to be drilled out there in the next 15 to 20 years, and they will get to a point to where they have to secure all their leases, which they did now, and some of those areas won't be drilled for a long time. We've already seen the number of rigs being cut back, and they're going more to like a 6 or 8 well pad. But going back to the pipeline issue a little bit, we were actually the first company out there to go ahead and put a pipeline in the ground. For my depot at Trenton, North Dakota there, we ran a water line 9 miles north of that location, and then we come off with feeder lines to Stat Oil. And like I said, that was even done before House Bill 1206. And I guess you look at what WAS is coming out and doing there, they are going ahead and paying hardly nothing for an easement. They're putting in a pipeline, and they're in direct competition with any independent water provider out there that wants to do that, because that independent water provider, number one, has to pay for his easement, whether it's $100 a rod or whatever, where WAS is just coming out and paying $16 a rod or just whatever they want because they have eminent domain. And number two, where I guess the mega water depots that WAS has put in, they're on the main highways like they said they were going to be, and they've got a heating system on those depots. And they have went ahead and contracted the large Armstrong heating system out of Florida, that where they have 6 ports, and they can go ahead and heat that water at any time. And that's why they're able to charge a little more, because most of your private water depots just have 2 ports. So that's where the difference in the price, they can charge more, and then they can be more efficient because they're so large.
Just so to clarify, a port means it's a place where you can load a truck, right?
Yeah.
And instead of having 2 ports, they have 6, so you can load 6 trucks at once instead of 2, so you can take more traffic.
Yep. The main purpose, though, we were forgetting on this project was to come out and provide potable drinking water for the area. And right now, I mean, we're selling industrial water WASs, and there's still people that need water hooked up. There's still rural residents that are right next to the WAS line that are not hooked up yet. And I feel that should be our ultimate goal of this project. We understand that we have to sell some water to pay for it. And as far as asking WAS to take on any more debt, I don't think they should. I mean, I was looking at a Southwest Water Pipeline where we have granted them $100 million, Southwest Water Pipeline, over the last 15, 20 years. Why can't we grant this project some money? I mean, there's a need for it. So I don't think we need to saddle them with more debt. We maybe need to put, I think, some restrictions on them to see how their funding is used. But I think there's an area where we can come to some terms and agreement here, and I'm still willing to do that. Like I said, I've been to negotiations for 2 years and 4 months of mediation, and I still think there's a plan if the right players would sit down and we could get this done.
The gentleman you've been listening to is Mr. Steve Mortensen. He is the head of a group called the Independent Water Providers, which are a group of private individuals who are supplying water to the oil industry for oil well drilling. And we also have with us Representative Todd Porter. He's a Republican from Mandan and the chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. And what these gentlemen are concerned about is legislation that would essentially regulate how a private or a public agency called the Southwest, it has to do with water in the oil industry. Thank you, gentlemen.
You
Sorry.
bet.
This place.
The legislature today is brought to you in part by Prairie Outpost Log Homes. Your